Hey there, and welcome. Today, we're diving into network analysis to tackle a really fascinating question. In any network, whether it's social media or a business, how do you actually find the most influential person? Let's jump right in. Okay, so chances are you're an expert with data that fits nicely into tables, right? You've got your rows, your columns, it all makes sense. But what if I told you the most valuable insights aren't in those individual cells, but in the connections between them? What if the actual shape of your data is where the real story is?
So, how do we even begin to look at these relationships when a spreadsheet just won't do the trick? Well, we have to move beyond that flat, two-dimensional world of tables and step into the much more dynamic world of networks, or as they're more formally called, graphs.
Okay, check this out. We're looking at the exact same information here, just shown in two totally different ways. On the left, that's our familiar table of friendships. But on the right, that's a network graph. And boom, suddenly that hidden structure just pops right out. This is the big shift in thinking we're talking about today.
Now, to get our heads around these graphs, we really only need two key terms. First up, you've got nodes. A node is just an entity in the network. In our little example here, each of those dots represents a person or a user. Simple enough, right?
And the second piece of the puzzle, edges. An edge is simply the line that connects two nodes, and it represents their relationship. Here, an edge means is friends with. So nodes and edges, that's the whole shebang, the basic building blocks of any network.
All right, that works perfectly for friendships, right? They're usually mutual. But what about all those relationships that are kind of one-sided? I mean, does every connection have to be a two-way street?
No way. In this slide, wow, it just perfectly illustrates the difference. On the left, we have an undirected graph for a mutual thing like friendship. See? No arrows. But on the right, we have a directed graph. Think about it like a professional endorsement on a networking site. One person endorses another. That little arrow shows you the direction. This simple tweak lets us model a whole new universe of complex one-way relationships.
And that right there, that brings us to the absolute core of what we're talking about today. Once we've got this network all mapped out, how do we find the real key players? In a network full of people, who is the most important person?
Well, you know what? The answer is, it depends. Importance isn't some one-size-fits-all thing. Are you looking for the most popular person, the person who's the best connector, or maybe the biggest influencer? The answer totally changes depending on the question you ask. So let's explore 3 different ways to figure it out.
So let's start with the most obvious way to think about importance, just sheer popularity. Who's got the most direct connections? It's basically the network version of a high school popularity contest.
The way we measure this is called degree centrality. And honestly, it's about as simple as it sounds. You just count up the number of direct connections or edges each node has. The more connections, the higher your score. That's it.
So if we look at our example network here, you can see right away that 5 users are tied for the top spot, each with 3 friends. Based on this one measurement, they are the most important. They're the social butterflies of this particular network.
So the key thing to remember here is simple. Degree centrality is fantastic for finding those local hubs, the nodes that have the most direct lines out to other people. But I don't know, just counting connections, it feels a little basic, right? What about someone who doesn't have the most friends, but they're acting as a critical bridge that connects totally different groups? Now that's an interesting idea.
And that is exactly where betweenness centrality comes into play. It measures how often a specific node sits on the shortest path between any 2 other nodes. You really should think of these nodes as being gatekeepers or bridges. For information to get from one side of the network to the other, it has to go through them.
Okay, now this is where it gets really fascinating. Take a look at this table. A totally different person just shot to the top. User 0. They don't have the most friends, not by a long shot, but they are the crucial link between 2 clusters in our network that would otherwise be separate. If you took user 0 out of the picture, the whole community could fracture. So, the big takeaway here? A high between the score points you to those absolutely indispensable connectors. These nodes aren't just popular. They're the very glue holding the entire network together. All right, so we've got our popular hubs and our critical bridges. But what about another kind of more subtle kind of importance? What if it's not just about how many people you know, but who you know? What about being connected to other important people? This, my friends, is what we measure with eigenvector centrality. And the idea behind it is just brilliant. It says your importance isn't just about your connections. It's about how important your connections are. Being friends with a celebrity is worth a whole lot more than being friends with a recluse, right? Your influence gets a boost from your friend's influence.
So when we run the numbers for our little network here, check out what happens. A third group of users rises to the top. Users 1 and 2 have the highest eigenvector centrality. Why? Because they're not just connected, they're connected to each other and to other well-connected people, creating this really powerful core of influence.
So here's the bottom line. If you're trying to find the real influencers, the people whose importance is magnified by the importance of their network, eigenvector centrality is the tool that's going to reveal them.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap. We've just looked at 3 totally different ways to answer that one question: who is the most important? Degree centrality, that finds your popular hubs. Betweenness centrality, that finds your critical gatekeepers. And eigenvector centrality, that finds the true influencers. 3 different questions, 3 different answers, all from the very same network.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important thought. The right answer always depends on your goal. Are you trying to spread a message fast? Go find the hubs. Need to control how information flows? You need the gatekeepers. Trying to change opinions? You're looking for the influencers. So I'll leave you with this. When you look at your network, which kind of connector truly matters most?
Hey, if this explainer helped you get a handle on network analysis, do me a favor and hit that like button. Share it with someone who might find it useful, and of course, subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks so much for tuning in.